So it's kind of like all the jobs that no one else takes on that are too complex or too mad, or that need to go in public exhibition. Generally, I get a call and it's just like, can you make this? Can you make a lighthouse? Can you make a toy cart? Can you make, what was the other one? Oh, the most recent one's, can you make a box with 2 cannons that you can aim and fire, and it's a game to see who can hit the target first? That kind of thing, you know. Anything that involves art and mechanisms, that's me. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of maker of all things, you know. My education was interesting because it was an open crafts course. So they taught you woods, metals, ceramics, glass, the whole spectrum of stuff. Great workshops, great facilities. But the theory alongside it was very much traditional art, as in, you know, you became a maker, you became someone who produced work for galleries, for exhibitions and that kind of stuff. And it sat all right with me for a little bit. And then I started, you know, when you graduate, you're like, all right, so I've got to spend 3 months making a piece that isn't going to sell. So where does the money come in from that? So I decided to, because I was a bike mechanic before I studied. And I was like, well, you know, essentially everything boils down to nuts and bolts. So I got into repairing stuff for a bit, mainly bikes, but also bits and bobs. Well, I had this, you know, burning thing in the back of my head about producing art, saying something with what you do. And yeah, so I started to combine the two. And I had all of the experience from my degree taught me about previous artists, and I got into guerrilla art, street art, this kind of stuff. Things that you had less permission for, less permission to do. And just mashed the two. And then, because luckily enough, in and around Falmouth, there's a pretty good scene of automata makers. So automata being self-moving sculptures, that kind of stuff. Massive heritage automata makers have, but there's only about, I don't know, a dozen or so of note in the country. And they're all pretty much in Cornwall. So I was diligently going to visit as many as I could whilst I was down there. And I worked alongside amazing artists, really, really good stuff. And that was it. You know, I saw that they could make a living out of it, albeit in a boat or a shed or something like that. Make these beautiful, like intricate, moving pieces of artwork that could either take the piss or have something quite serious involved in it, in terms of concept. But it drew in, or it still does, draw in a lot of different people, quite a wide audience. So you get people who are really interested in the idea that you're portraying, from an artist's perspective, or people who just like to see the movement, the sound, the light, and then they're asking questions about how it's moved and mechanized. And I use a lot of recycled stuff. So the third point of call is what's it made out of? You know, I've used helicopter engines and fire extinguishers and all sorts. A lot of it's like, guess what it is, which I really like doing. You know, it's good fun. I think I started off with probably 4 decent installation pieces, and I used them to start building a portfolio of what you could have, what's capable, what I'm capable of, sort of thing. And then I started. So I was in a good artist scene, and a lot of them needed niche stuff made, and there was no one there, especially in Cornwall, or those who were running their own businesses. So yeah, it was just a matter of getting a little bit of a hook, I guess, with a bit of reputation with the local artists, and then it just built and built and built, and eventually I started working with a playground manufacturer in Bristol when I first came here, and that was that's what started the ball rolling. I started to produce work that was pretty big, paid relatively well eventually, but it was a real test of my skills, because it's got to be bomb proof. It's going to be there for 10-15 years. You're being attacked by 5-year-olds for its entire life. So you know, it's a really nice way of gaining a bit of confidence and having it knocked enough times to make sure that it's what you want to be doing. It was just having those a few images, a few examples of what I could do, and then working with other people, getting a little bit of their experience from their commissions, because they were rolling in on big stuff. One of the automaton makers I was working with in Falmouth got a commission with Kew Gardens. Fantastic. 2 really big automata, they're still there. And she got me in to help her alongside that. I was working with her for a good few months, and I think that was a good segue. Eventually I decided that there wasn't enough work in Cornwall as a sort of not an established name. A lot of the people had established names and gone back there. So I decided to come to Bristol to sort of make a name for myself. Old story, but yeah. Projects that took me out of my comfort zone. I think the last one was for Great Yarmouth. So it was this big outdoor festival, and it was supposed to be relatively small scale, self-moving sculptures, and they were based on jellyfish and squids and that kind of stuff. So undulating mechanisms made out of stainless steel and that kind of stuff. And I'd only just recently got into metalwork and welding. That pushed me to, because I'd only ever done small miniature stuff, and that pushed me way out of my comfort zone, that kind of stuff. And the other one in terms of technical builds was probably like a 3+ meter lighthouse, steel-clad lighthouse for actual installation on the Welsh coast. So it had to be a functioning lighthouse. And it's all well and good making things imply and making them, look like they'd work, but to actually make it work is quite another story. And that was just me and Ali. And it's when I started to involve other craftspeople, other artists in projects that I was getting. That was really interesting because, you're just pushed into a whole other world, and you learn an awful lot from each other doing that. My whole introduction to mechanisms, to understanding things from a practical point of view, was through essentially taking stuff apart, which my eldest brother taught me, and then toys like Meccano and Lego and that kind of stuff, like old stuff. And we didn't have much, but we were taken around a lot of steam fairs by my parents, and I loved it, absolutely loved it, because steam tractors, trains, steam rollers, everything's there on show. You can see the cogs, the shafts, the chains, the steam, the smoke, all that kind of stuff. And as soon as you start actually looking at it with a critical eye, you can kind of work out what's where, why it's there, how it works, that kind of stuff. And but it all came back to this idea of the toy, essentially the way I view the world. Any kind of mechanism, any machine is just a big toy, and you can veil it under this idea of being more efficient or something like that. Nah, it's just a toy. You can do all this kind of stuff with a hammer, but having a mechanism to do it is far more enjoyable to watch. And I went back to this idea of triang toys, tin plate, this kind of stuff, and I started reading in it, doing a lot of reading of the concept of toys and gifts and this kind of stuff. Massive amounts of information and history revolved around it, because it's one of the earliest notable objects. You've got practical objects, and then you've got this weird thing called a toy that has no real genuine function other than entertainment. But it does. It's like, in many ways, the prototypes that I do and many other craftspeople and inventors do, they're toys, and a lot of them actually started out as toys and then made into real things, full scale. So I started to come across these write-ups on toys, these introductions by people who've done a lot of research. It's the exploration of an idea, and that kind of stuff. And as an artist, that's a really interesting thing to start playing with. I think, like Meccano especially, it was the toy that brought about a generation of engineers. They were teaching people through this medium, very innocent medium, to start taking things apart, learning about how they worked, and that fed into the later lives of those people. So for me, it's like this weird, subtle world of an exchange of information, a teaching method without having to teach. If you can kind of get an object that says far more than anyone can, say in a book or something like that, and it's sort of distilled into this thing that you can take apart, you can modify, you can repair. I started that was the basic idea, and then it's branched off into loads of other different bits and bobs, subtle things that, but it's great. It started with Meccano, I guess. I tried to get the toy and put it into the modern age, step one. And that's really difficult to do, like especially with a traditional tin toy. We're inundated with plastics and this kind of stuff, throwaway toys. So making a tin toy in the modern age is kind of a statement, just by its very existence. And then you can sort of like subtly introducing ideas into that as well. And I said, I was talking about how adults are buying toys for their children, but they're really buying them for themselves. So the second point is kind of how adults are trying to relearn how to play through an object as well. So there's that aspect to it. But I think like the third part is because I'm trying to make stuff out of recycled materials, so aluminium cans, beer cans, NOS canisters, this kind of stuff. That carries quite a lot of weight in terms of what society is producing. And the reason I'm using those materials is because it's a toy is a representation of mankind's achievements, right? So what are our achievements of the modern age is a hell of a lot of waste, essentially. So I got into this idea through another artist of he was a puppeteer, of trying to sell or give people's waste back to them in a different light, in a different way, in order to get them to think about the idea of waste as material and see a tin can as pressed steel with a hell of a lot of manufacturing processes to get to that point. And you just like tossing it aside. It's got 101 different uses if you just use your noodle and find a few tools that will help you manipulate it. But also using NOS canisters is great. You're turning the irresponsible use of a particular gas that's housed in this beautiful little cylinder that's made really well, turning it into a whole different, throwing it into a different world. But it's still carries all those connotations with it, which I love. So it's a game of subtleties really. This is where it all started. The closest thing I could get to a big chunky Triang car or toy. They started with big chunky wheels, like big bodies, things you could throw down the stairs and that survive. So tin can, aluminium sardine tin, and then these are the bottoms of beer cans, all pressed in for that lovely sort of voluptuous shape. Trying to disguise it, but not too much. And the steering wheels are made out of a NOS canister. And then these ones have got an aluminium chassis that I make. That's the only bit of new material on it. Just a few screws and bolts, job done. So that's that. We're going into tanks, tractors, trucks, planes, in that sort of scale. On the smaller side of things, we've got this, which is my little howitzer. Same wheels on it. They carry on through the whole range of this sort of scale. Got a NOS canister for the barrel, bits of old copper pipe and a bit of plumbing, and that's all soldered together, and then it's sprung loaded. So you can load in your, I supply them with cork cannonballs, and you can fire them. They got a good 3-foot distance, and that goes into a little target like that, which has got legs, and you can set them up on your desk. Perfect desk toy.